And welcome back to Big Blue Sports on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. You ever bored on campus? Do you want to just get up and explore town while having fun? Well, there's no better way to do that than with Rockin' the Commons coming later this month on Saturday, September 27th. The event runs from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and is hosted by the lovely Fredonia Radio Systems, that's us, here on campus. There's nothing better than to take a stroll downtown and enjoy family activities, raffles, live music, and more. Can't wait to see you there. Again, that a week from this Saturday. Rockin' the Commons is always a lot of fun. You know, I say it sort of every year. It is our annual fundraiser that we have that supports Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo, which is one of the leading cancer hospitals, not only in the United States, but in the world as well. And it's something that a lot of work goes into. I mean, we start planning for Rockin' the Commons not long after the previous year's Rockin' the Commons ends. You know, we really start planning for it midway through the spring semester, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. But and I'll say this time and time again, there's a lot of work that goes into it. It is 1,000% worth it. It is incredible what we are able to do for such a great cause. There's live music, food. I'll be on the grill. Come see me. You know, raffles, games, all this sort of stuff. It really is. It's a fun day to be downtown hanging out. And the weather so far, and I don't want to jinx anything, we are 9 days out, so we're able to check the weather in Fredonia for that particular day. And it looks okay. We might get a little bit of sprinklage here and there. Temperature supposedly is going to be right around the high 60s, which is excellent. I think it's going to be a really nice day for it. So, yeah, definitely, make sure you stop by. We'll be there. It's 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. downtown in Barker Commons. So the next part of the show, we're going to talk about the NFL across week 2. Again, it is a very Bills-heavy show with it being game day, and we'll talk about that in the entire second half of the show today. First, we'll take a look at week 2 across the NFL. First up, we have the Thursday night game with the Green Bay Packers taking down Washington 27-18 at Lambeau Field. The Packers look very good. And I didn't see a ton of this game, but Green Bay looks really good. That is a team that if I'm an NFC team, I'm scared of. Since getting Micah Parsons, their already solid defense looks even better. They're actually the defense that I have in fantasy football. You know, their offense is good. Jordan Love is rolling. He threw for 292 and 2 touchdowns against a good Washington defense. Tucker Kraft had a phenomenal game. The Packers tight end, 6 catches for 124 yards and a touchdown. Green Bay wins it. They go to 2-0 on the season. On Sunday, the games, we had a lot of good ones. I was putting the newspaper together. Of course, I'm the editor-in-chief of The Leader, which I should mention that issue 1 of the fall semester of The Leader is out. It came out on Tuesday this week, so make sure to pick up a copy pretty much anywhere around campus and any academic building that you can find. But I was spending all of that day putting the paper together. I was actually in the newspaper office for 17 and a half hours. I believe I did that math correctly. Roughly 17 and a half. I got there at about 8:45 in the morning on Sunday, and I finally left at about 1:30 a.m., and it had already gone into Monday by that point. So I had the NFL Red Zone on my laptop as I was putting the newspaper together, so I saw, bits and pieces of these games, and of course watched the entire Bills game. But the games this weekend, and we'll get to the Bills-Jets game here in a minute, but the Bengals and Jacksonville, a great game between two teams that had started 1-0, the home opener for the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Bengals' biggest weakness, a lot of people thought it was going to be their defense, which, yeah, their defense isn't great, but that offensive line is still somehow not good. It's like the only year that Burrow actually had a good line in front of him was the year the Bengals went to the Super Bowl in 2021. But other than that, it's just like Cincinnati doesn't have anyone up front to block for Burrow, and they wonder why he so consistently is taking hits. He's getting injured because his linemen up front don't do anything. He doesn't have any time to throw, and he's just not well protected as a quarterback. He's one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league as a result. And once again, the Bengals fell victim to that, and it cost him this time. As Burrow went down in, I believe it was late in the first half, Burrow went down and had his foot rolled up on, and he was helped off the field, and they showed a shot of him in the locker room where he was like, I mean, he couldn't put any weight on his foot. Burrow was diagnosed with I believe it was a grade 3 turf toe injury, which turf toe always sounds kind of wimpy. It's not. It's a very serious injury. And so that injury is going to require surgery. And it said Burrow is going to miss a minimum of 3 months with this injury. He is out for most of the rest of the regular season. If the Bengals get him back this year at all, it'll be in like week 17. And that's if he even comes back in the regular season. He might not. And who knows if Jake Browning's going to be able to lead the Bengals to the playoffs. To be completely honest, I think he could. I think the Bengals offense is good enough to potentially do that. And Browning led him to the win on Sunday. But it's just, you look at that team without Burrow, and it very quickly loses a lot of luster. And you start to see the flaws that are there with Cincinnati. They don't have a good defense. Their offensive line is atrocious. They have 2 amazing receivers in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They have a very solid running back in Chase Brown. And they've got a couple good players. Like, Trey Hendrickson is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, but he's pretty much like, aside from him and maybe a couple other guys, you think about like maybe Logan Wilson in the linebacker spot, the Bengals do not have a strong defense whatsoever. And so you wonder, now that Burrow's going to be down for most of the rest of the regular season at least, there's some trouble with Cincinnati for sure. But the Bengals do get the win. They beat Jacksonville 31-27, and the Bengals are 2-0 at least to start this season. One of the best games of the weekend was a game that went to overtime, a little bit unexpected. The Dallas Cowboys defeating the New York Giants 40-37 in overtime, but Russell Wilson throwing for 450 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had an amazing game, a great duel. Brandon Aubrey kicked a 64-yard field goal, which was tied for the second longest in NFL history, I believe. It was tied with Matt Prater, who we'll talk more about later. Matt Prater's 64-yarder when he was with the Broncos in 2013. And I think Sebastian Janikowski hit a 64-yarder as well, I think, but I could be wrong. Of course, the all-time record is held by Justin Tucker, as Tucker hit a 66-yarder with the Ravens to beat the Lions a couple of years ago. But yeah, Dallas wins it 40-37, and the Cowboys are 1-1. They get their first win of the year. Giants 0-2. They have not played a home game yet. They are home this weekend. They have the Sunday night game. They play the Chiefs. That one should be interesting. Again, more on the Chiefs later. Ben Johnson's homecoming to Detroit did not go particularly well. Of course, Johnson, the new head coach of the Chicago Bears, returning to Detroit where he was the Lions offensive coordinator, and his team just got flat out smoked. The Lions were in command all day. Jared Goff had the same number of incomplete passes as he had touchdowns. Jared Goff was 23 of 28 passing for 334 yards and 5 touchdowns. I'd also like to take this time to mention that Jared Goff is my fantasy football starting quarterback. So that was cool. I was very appreciative of that, and it helped me to my first win of the year. So the Lions win 52-21. Amon-Ra St. Brown catches 3 touchdowns. I should also mention that Malik Neighbors in the Giants-Cowboys game had 9 catches for $167 and 2 scores, and he's also on my fantasy team. I have Jamar Chase and Malik Neighbors. I have no idea how. So the Lions win it 52-21, pick up their first win of the year. The Titans, Cam Ward's first home game as a Tennessee Titan, he threw one of the most unbelievable touchdowns I've ever seen a rookie quarterback throw, rolling to his right and firing all the way across his body and somehow completing it for the touchdown. This continues my thought that, yeah, Cam Ward is legit. I mean, I think that guy is going to be really, really good. But Tennessee does lose this one. They drop it 33-19. Matt Stafford, my other fantasy quarterback. It's a 2-quarterback league. I have Goff and Stafford, which is ironic because they were traded for each other. Stafford throws for 298 and 2 touchdowns as the Rams win it 33-19. Rams are 2-0 on the season. An AFC East battle between the team that the Bills play tonight and the team that they play on primetime in a couple weeks, as the Dolphins hosting the New England Patriots. Drake May with 3 total touchdowns, and despite Tua having not a bad day, 26-32 for 315 and 2 touchdowns, the Patriots beat the Dolphins 33-27. New England gets their first win of the year. The Dolphins drop to 0-2 and will hopefully drop to 0-3 tonight. I think they will. The 49ers and the Saints, anybody who went to this game down in New Orleans was paying money to watch a quarterback matchup between Mac Jones and Spencer Rattler, which, oh boy, does that sound like fun. Of course, Mac Jones in relief of the injured Brock Purdy. The 49ers do still get the win, 26-21. A good game for Mac Jones. He threw for 279 and 3 touchdowns as the Niners win at 26-21. San Francisco is 2-0. Again, they've played both their games on the road to start the year. Saints have dropped to 0-2 with 2 games in the Dome to start the season. We'll come back to the Bills game, so we'll get the other games. The Seahawks in Pittsburgh taking down the Steelers 31-17. Sam Darnold, 295 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. And one of the oddest blunders on special teams that you'll ever see occurred in this game. So the Seahawks were kicking the ball off, and the Steelers just sort of let it go into the end zone. It rolls into the end zone. Remember, that's a live football. It stayed in the end zone, and George Halani on the Seahawks coverage team ran all the way down the field and recovered the ball in the end zone. That is a touchdown. The Seahawks win this game 31-17. They are 1-1. The Steelers drop to 1-1 as well. The Browns and the Ravens, always an interesting matchup. Of course, you've got the history there with the Ravens being the former Cleveland Browns. The Ravens, of course, in Week 1 had that devastating Sunday night loss to the Bills in Buffalo, where they blew a 40-25 lead late in the game to lose by 1. Thank you, Matt Prater. The Ravens responded. Lamar Jackson with 4 touchdown passes as Baltimore crushes the Browns 41-17 for their first win of the year. Browns are 0-2. What a surprise there. One of the wildest games of the weekend and the wildest ending, I would say, the Broncos and the Colts in Indianapolis. Final seconds of the game, Broncos up by 2, 28-26. Spencer Schrader, the Colts kicker, lines up for a 60-yard field goal and misses, but there's a penalty on the Broncos. It's a 15-yard penalty for leverage, which means as a defensive lineman, you cannot go over the top. You can't use an opposing lineman to sort of propel yourself over the pile to try and block the kick. And they do that to reduce injuries and just ensure overall player safety. So it moved 15 yards closer, and Spencer Schrader got another shot from 45, and he buried it. Colts win it 29-28. The Indianapolis Colts, led by Daniel Jones, are 2-0, and Daniel Jones had another good game, throwing for 316 yards and a touchdown. Jonathan Taylor was the workhorse on the ground. He ran for 165 yards on 25 carries. As the Colts are 2-0, the Broncos drop to 1-1. The Arizona Cardinals are also 2-0 despite a really solid game from Bryce Young. Bryce Young attempted 55 passes in this game. He completed 35 of them for 328 yards and 3 touchdowns, but it's still not enough as the Arizona Cardinals win it 27-22 despite a 13-point fourth quarter for the Panthers, a fourth quarter where Carolina outscored Arizona 13-0. Cardinals improved to 2-0 on the season. Carolina drops to 0-2. The Super Bowl rematch of last year, the Eagles and the Chiefs in Kansas City. The Eagles are able to put it on late despite not a very good passing game for either quarterback in particular, a defensive battle. And the Eagles get the win at Arrowhead. They win it 20-17. Philadelphia is 2-0. And the Kansas City Chiefs are 0-2. Can you believe that? It is the first time that the Chiefs have been 0-2 since 2014. 11 years, which was only Andy Reid's second year as the coach of the Chiefs. Furthermore, it's the first time in Mahomes' career that he's been 0-2. The last time he was 0-2 was his sophomore year of high school. They said that on the Red Zone, and the Chiefs are 0-2 to start the year again. They're going on the road to face the Giants on Sunday Night Football this upcoming week. Speaking of Sunday Night Football, not a particularly entertaining game, a rough one for J.J. McCarthy as the Falcons defense stomps all over the Vikings, taking down Minnesota in Minnesota 22-6. Bijan Robinson ran for 143 yards in this game. The Falcons get their first win of the year. They're 1-1. The Vikings drop to 1-1 as well. Monday night doubleheader, and it was a good one. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers with a late comeback, a late touchdown. They beat the Houston Texans 20-19. Tampa Bay is 2-0. The Texans are 0-2. And the other game, the night game, the Chargers continue to impress. They beat the Raiders 20-9 after a rough game from Raiders quarterback Geno Smith. That still sounds weird. The Chargers are 2-0, Raiders 1-1. And of course, as promised, we're going to take a look at the Bills-Jets game. This game, simply put, from the very beginning, was not close in the slightest. Buffalo thoroughly dominated this game from the very start. The Jets received the opening kickoff and went 3-and-out, actually losing a yard and punting. Bills get the ball and put together a 12-play, 81-yard drive, capped off by a James Cook 1-yard rushing touchdown to put the Bills ahead 7-0. On the very first play of the Jets' drive, Justin Fields trying to run up the middle, and Joey Bosa, who has been a stud so far in his first 2 games with the Bills. Bosa forces the fumble. A.J. Epinesa recovers. The Bills take over just outside the red zone. They do end up having to settle for 3 as Matt Prater boots a 28-yard field goal. Bills up 10-0 very early in the game. That was the score at the end of the first quarter. In the second quarter, the Bills, a 9-play, 46-yard drive, capped off by a 52-yard Matt Prater field goal. Bills up 13-0. Jets get the ball back and again punt the ball. They actually go backwards by 7 yards. That was a play where Justin Fields took a 10-yard sack, as well as Breece Hall going backwards 5 yards thanks to an excellent tackle by Tre'Davious White. The Bills get the ball back, and in 5 plays, they go 73 yards, most of which James Cook scores his second rushing touchdown of the game, a 44-yard touchdown rumble to put the Bills ahead 20-0 in the second quarter. Jets did get some points on their next trip down the field. Nick Folk, the veteran kicker, with a 51-yard field goal to put the Jets on the board. Still 20-3 Buffalo, and that was the score at the end of the first half. The Bills received the second half kickoff, drove down the field 11 plays, 64 yards. Matt Prater kicks a 33-yard field goal to put the Bills up 23-3 heading into the fourth quarter. First drive of the fourth, 12 plays, 79 yards. The Bills actually overcome. James Cook fumbled but recovered his own fumble. The first play of the fourth quarter, the Bills go with an end around to Elijah Moore, the former Jet, and Moore scores a 4-yard touchdown. Bills up 30-3 in the fourth quarter. So Buffalo on top 30-3. The Jets, again, able to get a sort of garbage time touchdown as Tyrod Taylor came into this game. That was fun, and threw a 5-yard touchdown pass. But the Bills win it 30-10 to go to 2-0. The Jets are 0-2. And there was a little bit of a scare in this game. It was early on, and I'm trying to remember what drive it was on. It was one of the Bills' earlier drives that Allen was at the bottom of a pile. And here it was. So it was the Bills' first drive of the second quarter. Josh Allen tried to go up the middle on a 2nd and 7, and he got hit as, going to the ground. One of the defensive players for the Jets sort of reached their hand in and just caught Josh Allen in the nose. Got it pretty good. Very good chance that it's a broken nose. And I'm yawning. Sorry about that. But, you don't necessarily need your nose to play quarterback. But Josh Allen comes running to the sideline. And I'm focused on putting the paper together. But all I hear is Tony Romo saying, "Oh, no. Oh, guys, this doesn't look good. Oh, no, this is bad." And I'm thinking, I'm just watching the face of the franchise run to the sideline. And I'm thinking, well, that's very not good. I kind of froze there for a minute, and then they showed what happened, and he had gotten himself pretty good in the nose. It was coming along pretty good. Had a pretty, gnarly little nosebleed going on there. But he was able to come back, and Mitch Trubisky came into the game. And I have to note, on the very first play that Mitch Trubisky was in the game for, he throws a 32-yard pass to Josh Palmer for a first down. Trubisky only was in the game for a couple of plays, as at the start of the second quarter, which was only 2 plays later, Allen did come back into the game. So it really happened at probably a very good spot in the game. There was that extra time at the end of the first quarter for the medical trainers to sort everything out. Supposedly, Josh Allen's okay. His nose has probably smelled better days, but supposedly it's okay. Bills win it 30-10. They go to 2-0 on the season and are, of course, at home against the Miami Dolphins tonight. And we will preview that matchup here in the final spot of the show. We'll take a look at some of the other games going on across the NFL as well. The games on Sunday, you've got Green Bay heading to Cleveland to take on the Browns at 1 p.m. The 1 p.m. games, Colts at Titans as well. We'll see if Daniel Jones can keep that going. Bengals at Vikings. Of course, J.J. McCarthy is also hurt for the Vikings. So that game is going to be a quarterback matchup between Jake Browning and Carson Wentz. Oh, boy. Steelers-Patriots at 1 o'clock. That one could be interesting. Aaron Rodgers matches up against New England. Rams and Eagles, a battle of 2-0 teams. The Jets, looking for their first win of the year, head down to Tampa to face the Buccaneers. Raiders and Commanders square off in a Super Bowl rematch of days gone by. It was years ago they played in the Super Bowls. In the 80s they played. An NFC South battle between the Falcons and the Panthers in Carolina, and the Texans and Jaguars battle in the AFC South in Jacksonville. 4:05, a battle in the NFC, or the AFC West, I should say, the Broncos and the Chargers. That one out in LA. Other 4:05 kickoff, the Seahawks hosting the Saints. The 4:25 games, the Chicago Bears still looking for their first win of the year. They host the Dallas Cowboys. And the San Francisco 49ers at home against the Arizona Cardinals. Sunday night, 8:20 on NBC, the New York Giants against the Kansas City Chiefs. Russell Wilson versus Patrick Mahomes. And that's a battle of two 0-2 teams, and the Chiefs are 6.5-point favorites. I wouldn't be surprised if that number really grew. But could the Giants possibly pull off the upset and send Kansas City to 0-3 on the season? And then the Monday night game, this is going to be a great game. The Lions and the Ravens in Baltimore. Ravens are 4.5-point favorites. I'm a little surprised the line is that much. I think that's one that's going to be really close. I'm a little surprised to see the line that close together. And again, I'll make my picks for week 3 of the NFL season at the end of the show. Of course, the Bills hosting the Dolphins tonight at 8:15 on Amazon Prime. I will be there. I am so excited for this game. It is going to be so much fun. Yeah, and I would say look for me on TV, but we're sitting in the 300 level, so I'd be absolutely shocked if you saw me. Well, we're going to take a short break and then talk about the Dolphins-Bills matchup tonight. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports today on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. It is game day, of course. The Bills hosting the Miami Dolphins at 8:15 tonight. Buffalo is 11.5-point favorites for the game this evening. ESPN's matchup predictor gives the Bills a 77.2% chance to win the game tonight. And again, Buffalo, a heavy favorite to win this game. Miami is off to a rough start. I mean, they had their week 1 game where they got blown out by the Colts and then losing to New England last week as well. Things are getting ugly down there in Miami. And I was listening to WGR earlier in the week. They talked about the potential of Mike McDaniel getting fired. I don't know that it happens after this game. It could. I don't know if it does, though. I think they waited out a little bit more with him, but things are certainly not great in Miami. Of course, there's pressure on the Bills. This is a trap. This is a potential trap game. It's the last game that it's probably, unless they were to somehow meet in the playoffs. I don't think Miami's getting there. It is either way. It's the last regular season game against the Dolphins in this stadium ever. The Dolphins, over the course of this stadium's history, the Bills have not had a bigger rival than the Miami Dolphins. And I still believe that. You think back to in the 70s, the Bills could never beat Miami. They lost every single matchup to the Dolphins in the entire decade of the 1970s. They lost 20 straight games against the Dolphins. When they finally ended that streak, it was week 1 in 1980, Joe Ferguson throwing the game-winning touchdown pass to Roosevelt Leaks, and the Bills fans stormed the field and tore down the goalposts. And the coolest part about that is that my mom, who was 10 years old at the time, was there and got to see it. And it's just really cool that, you have these memories. And to me, if I'm thinking of a Bills historic moment at the stadium, if I'm thinking of one particular opponent, it's probably going to be Miami. The only other one who is in that conversation is New England. With it being like you think about the 2003 season opener when Sam Adams, the 400-pound, I'm yawning again. Nice, Matt. The 400-pound defensive tackle rumbling for an interception return for a touchdown. The Bills intercepting Brady 4 times and beating the Patriots 31-0. You think about 2011 when the Bills had not beaten New England since that 2003 season opener. And the Bills were down 21-0 in the second quarter, and Ryan Fitzpatrick leads the comeback. Ryan Lindell kicks the game-winning field goal for the Bills to win it 34-31 in what was probably the single best moment of the entire playoff drought. But yeah, I mean, those are really the main two. New England games that are like good moments for the Bills. There were a lot of great moments for the Patriots in that stadium. But if you're thinking of one particular opponent that the Bills have had such a long history with in this stadium, the first one that comes to mind is Miami. I mean, I already mentioned the game in 1980. You know, they played in Buffalo in the playoffs twice in the early 90s. And by the way, the Bills won both of those games. I just thought I'd like to mention that. You think about, the matchups between Jim Kelly versus Dan Marino, Marv Levy versus Don Shula. Like, it was incredible. And those matchups were so great. There's so much history between these two rivals. And there's been so many awesome games between the Bills and the Dolphins. I already mentioned one of them, mentioning the playoff games. And the one that sticks out to me is the divisional round game the first year that the Bills went to the Super Bowl in 1990. It was earlier in that year they had played Miami in their two games. They had played the Dolphins in Miami down at Joe Robbie Stadium, which was then Joe Robbie Stadium. It's now Hard Rock Stadium. They had played early in the season, and the Bills got hammered. They got smoked 30-7. The Dolphins just dominated them. It was so bad that Marv Levy benched his starters in the fourth quarter. Late in the season, it's the second to last game of the regular season. Jim Kelly had been knocked out of the game where they were playing the Giants at the Meadowlands the week before, maybe two. It was a week before, yeah. And Jim Kelly was knocked out of the game with a knee injury. And so Frank Reich, the backup, comes in. And in Week 16 against the Dolphins, Frank Reich leads the Bills to a win. They won it 24-14, and the fans tore down the goalposts again as they had beaten them, and Frank Reich led them to the win, and they had clinched the division for the third year in a row. Division titles used to be a much bigger deal than they are now. They're still a big deal, but, they're not necessarily tearing down goalposts level of big deals anymore. And they met in the playoffs again that same year. They met in the divisional round of the playoffs in Buffalo. It was Jim Kelly's first game back from injury, and it was, part of the game was playing in the snow. Dan Marino was like the only Miami Dolphin who could ever play in the cold. And, Marino was from Pittsburgh, so he was plenty used to it. But it's just like the Dolphins always had a tough time in the cold weather. And, it was a phenomenal game. The Bills won it 44-34 in an absolute shootout. The final score makes it seem like it was like a really, really close game. It wasn't. The Bills were in command for most of the game. But, Buffalo got the win in that one and ended up going to the Super Bowl that year. They met in the wild card round in Buffalo in 95 as well. And the Bills won that game as well. And, of course, they played in the playoffs just a couple years ago when Tua Tagovailoa was hurt. And it was the Damar Hamlin year, the 2022 season. They met in the wild card round, and Skylar Thompson almost led the Dolphins to a win in that game. The Bills played an unbelievably sloppy game and still found a way to win that wild card game before getting steamrolled by the Bengals at home the next week. You think about just the history, and again, and there's games I didn't even mention. I mean, one other game against Miami, you think about 2002, which is probably not a game that jumps off the page to a lot of people. But in 2002, you had Drew Bledsoe versus the quarterback of the Dolphins that day was Ray Lucas. But they didn't do a whole lot of passing the ball because an interesting thing, fun thing about the 2002 Bills is that their defense was not good, like, at all. Their offense was great. Their defense was bad, and their special teams was, like, worst in the league. So the defense, Ricky Williams ran for something like 260 yards in the snow. I mean, he ran all over Buffalo on that particular day. But Drew Bledsoe was able to lead the Bills to a crazy win. There were parts of the second half game that was like basically being played in a blizzard. It was so much fun. And yeah, it was really cool, and I wasn't necessarily around for that, but you think about the games, another game to mention between the Bills and the Dolphins in Buffalo is 2018, the first time that Josh Allen ever played them at home. It was week 17. Both the Bills and the Dolphins were out of the playoffs, and it was Kyle Williams' last NFL game, and the Bills absolutely clobbered Miami. It was 42-17. I remember Josh Allen had 5 total touchdowns. If I remember correctly, he threw 3 and ran for 2. I mean, he was absolutely just incredible on that particular day. And that sort of started the run of the Bills tending to dominate against the Miami Dolphins. They've had games. They had a game a couple years ago where they beat them like 35-0 in Miami. They've had games. I was at the game 2 years ago at home when I was at the game 2 years ago at home when the Bills beat the Dolphins 48-20. Stephon Diggs caught 3 touchdowns. And I remember the Bills were 2-1 because they had lost their season opener against the Jets on Monday Night Football. And the Dolphins came in. Miami was 3-0. They were coming off of the game where they scored 70 points against the Broncos. And it seemed like everybody around the NFL thought, this is the Dolphins. It's the Dolphins' time. Like they're going to be so good. They're going to go to Buffalo and they're going to beat these Bills. And then the Bills had something to say about that. Josh Allen in his career against Miami has played against them 15 times in the regular season and playoffs combined. Allen's record in those 15 games is 13-2. It is the level of domination that Tom Brady had against the Bills. It's pretty close to that level of domination. It's maybe not quite what Brady did to the Bills, but I mean, it's pretty close. So tonight's game, my final score prediction for the game, I think the Bills win 41-13 is my final score prediction. I think James Cook runs for 3 touchdowns tonight, which I know that's insane. I actually did put money on that. So fingers crossed that comes through in the clutch. But yeah, I think that Buffalo, I think they're going to be a particularly deadly team, and they're gonna give Miami some fits. So I'm going to take just a short, about a 15-second break, and then going to come back and talk about the NFL predictions in the last few minutes of the show. I'm going to talk about my picks for Week 3 in the NFL. Thanks for listening to Big Blue Sports on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports. Of course, High Noon Friday, one of the longest, what we believe to be the longest running college radio show in the country. It's been running since 1984. So my predictions for Week 3 of the NFL season, of course, I already said I believe the Bills are going to beat the Dolphins. We'll go down through the Sunday games. Packers at Browns. Green Bay, a 7.5-point favorite. And again, I think this is the type of game where you really see just how good Green Bay is. I think the Packers easily take care of the Browns and win this game somewhat convincingly. I think they cover the spread as well. Colts at Titans. This is one where I think we could see Cam Ward picking up his first win. I mean, with Josh Allen, his rookie year, the Bills started 0-2, and then they had a big upset win over the Vikings in Minnesota. I actually think the Titans win this game. This one kind of goes back and forth. I know the Colts are off to a good start. I actually think Tennessee gets the win in this one. Bengals at Vikings, the battle of the backup quarterbacks. I think Cincinnati wins it. I think Jake Browning is a better quarterback than Carson Wentz at this point. So I do think that the Bengals are able to get the win because of their talented offense, and they get off to a 3-0 start, but not really going to be able to sustain it, I don't think. Steelers and Patriots in New England. I actually think Aaron Rodgers plays pretty well, and I think Pittsburgh wins this game, which, again, would be good for the Bills, of course. I think the Steelers do get the win in this one. Rams at Eagles, a battle of 2-0 teams. And I think the Eagles get the win in this one. I think the Rams are not bad, certainly, but I think the Eagles are going to get the win and go to 3-0. A couple more 1 o'clock games. Jets at Buccaneers. This is one that I could honestly really see going either way. The Bucs are 6.5-point favorites. I think this one is going to be close, but I do think Tampa gets the win to go to 3-0. Raiders and Commanders in Washington. I think the Commanders get back on track and get the win in this game, although the Raiders haven't necessarily looked bad in their first 2 games. They haven't looked awful. Last couple 1 o'clock games, Falcons at Panthers. I think Carolina gets their first win of the year in this game. I think Bryce Young puts together a solid performance, and the Panthers beat the Atlanta Falcons. Last 1 o'clock game, Texans at Jaguars. I think Houston's got to win this one, and I think they will to get in the win column in 2025. They pick up their first win of the season. Broncos at Chargers. The Broncos are going to be furious over last week's loss. I think they're going to come out fuming, and they're going to beat the Chargers in LA, which will basically be a home game for them. Saints at Seahawks. I think the Seahawks win flat out. I think they're just a better team than New Orleans is. 425 games, Cowboys at Bears. I think Chicago gets the win here. The Cowboys aren't a team that really plays the best on the road. I think Chicago get their first win. Ben Johnson gets his first win as the head coach of the Bears. Cardinals at 49ers, another battle of 2-0 teams. And I think this one could be pretty close. The 49ers favored by 2.5 points. I think it is pretty close like that. I actually think Arizona goes in and gets the win. They go to 3-0. Niners drop to 2-1. Sunday Night Football, Chiefs at Giants. I really, really want to pick the Giants. I really want to pick the Giants, but I'm not going to. I think Kansas City's got to get a win at some point. And I think they're going to beat the Giants because the Giants are just not very good. And the Monday Night Football, Lions and Ravens. That's going to be an awesome game. And I think the Lions go into Baltimore and beat the Ravens. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, that is going to be all for Big Blue Sports this afternoon. I want to thank everybody tuning in as well as everyone listening here in the station as well. I will be at the Bills game tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, 8:15 kickoff on Amazon Prime Video. The Bills and the Dolphins doing it one more time at Highmark Stadium. Thanks for listening to Big Blue Sports today. We'll catch you back here next week. Go Bills.